Hi, everyone. Welcome to the June 1st Agent Sandbox meeting. I'm your host, Janet. Today we have one topic. We want to discuss all the remaining items or the items we've made changes to the beta API that we are going to ship soon. Let me also share the agenda, link to the agenda in the chat. So in the agenda, I linked to the beta milestone, which linked to a bunch of open and closed issues and PRs. So as we discussed last time, we have a bunch of items for beta. We've closed a few of them. I think we've discussed this one previously and we want to change the behavior of creating Sandbox, a service for Sandbox automatically. So we have this change merged now for supporting the Sandbox API and make it supporting the service API in the Sandbox and make it opt-in. So this is changed to an opt-in pooling for if you set to and true is going to enable a service. But then if you set it to false, it doesn't create a service for you and the default is false. But for backward compatibility, we still handle the existing sandbox so that we avoid any disruption. And then back to the other beta item. We also have this change in, and note that all the changes are in the main branch right now. So and we are holding on the release for now before we finish all the breaking change in beta API. And then we expect to ship the release soon and earlier this week. The other item, the beta API, is the change of the replicas field in the sandbox spec. So previously we have a field on replicas, which can only be 0 or 1. This is for signaling suspension and resume of a sandbox, but we find that that field is a bit limiting because we want to introduce more sophisticated ways of suspension and resume. We want to have more kinds of different policies. And replicas also make it slightly confusing to users because unlike other types of spec replicas fields, it can only be either 0 or 1. So we make that change, we're also removing the scale sub-resource. And the new field we're introducing is spec the operating mode. Currently, it has 2 modes, running or suspended, and the default is running. So this behavior is not, the default behavior is not changing, but the field is different. So I want to also hear what people think about this. Is it breaking anyone by removing the scale sub-resource? Just from the feedback, we didn't see a clear use case or need for the scale sub-resource. All right.
I don't think it's, at least for me, it's not breaking anything. I'm just curious as why is it an operating mode instead of a Boolean value of suspended, true, false? Is there a plan to maybe add more operating modes in the future?
Yeah, I think we're planning to add more potentially add more fields, and most importantly, in the Kubernetes API convention, the boolean is uh, basically discouraged because we almost always want to extend that field, and a enum field makes it easier for us to extend in the future. And then for operating mode, we can imagine that in the future, instead of just hard pausing or suspending by killing the pod, potentially we can have a mode for just scaling the pod vertically by reducing the resource. So it's still running, but it's not taking a lot of resources while it's not actively being used. That's a potential way to uh, extend that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then any other feedback about this one or questions? All right. And then I think we also have this one. This is a proposal that just got merged. And this is not this is not implemented yet, but I think it's going to, we are going to have a PR today soon. So, so basically the TLDR of this change is that we, in the Sandbox claim, so Sandbox claim is a API for you to stem a resource from a worm pool. And the worm pool reference a Sandbox template. So basically you can create a bunch of worm sandboxes from a template and put them in a worm pool. And then you can use Clem to claim those worm resources. And then that makes it faster for you to start a sandbox. And in the old Alpha API, we have both the worm pool field and the template reference field. So basically, you can specify, technically, you can specify both worm pool and template, which is ambiguous because they should be mutually exclusive. And also there's some complicated handling of when you specify both or either. How do you handle that case? So to simplify that, eventually we decided to just support a worm pool reference field and not the template reference. And if users want to create just sandbox out of the template, and meaning they only want to do cold start of sandboxes, they don't need warm resources. They just use the template as a cookie cutter for easier creation, or maybe they just want to limit, maybe the platform team want to limit what sandboxes the developers can claim from the cluster. They can use template reference for that. But instead of supporting the template reference, we let the users use worm pool reference. So you either create a worm pool for your resources, and you can scale up or down the worm pool to indicate how many worm resources you want to keep alive or keep warming in the cluster. And then if you don't want any warm sandboxes, you can just set the replicas to 0. That will indicate that the all the resources you claim from worm pool will always be cold. And then that replaces the template reference because that makes the whole API easier to reason about. And then if users want to, so there's an environment variable field you can set in the plan as well, which is an existing field. If you set that, and that will allow users to overwrite the sandbox state claim from the warm pool. But then, and because pods, that's an immutable field in pods, so the sandbox created with that field set will always be cold. And so this is also a breaking change, but I think because it doesn't make sense for users to specify both warm pool and template reference anyways. So the behavior is not going to be breaking, but the field is going to be different. So this also requires some additional step to migrate the CR to the new API. Is there anything anyone want to add? Is Rita here? Maybe you want to add something?
No, I think you covered everything, Janet.
Yeah. So this proposal is also written by Shruti, and she's also going to own the moving from alpha to beta. And any other questions or feedback about this proposal?
I have a question about suspend and resume plan also for the future. Basically, from what I understood right now for the API, you want to just when it's suspended, the pod should be able, like the controller just deletes the pod underneath the sandbox, right? And then resume it creates back. But is there a plan for the future? I think I read it in the proposal, maybe, I'm not sure, to actually suspend the pod or just to do it this like higher level. So, I mean, literally suspend the pod before running it.
So we have some plan around more sophisticated suspension and resume. So, for example, there's some integration with the snapshot and the GK snapshot API for being able to store the state both for suspending and resume later, but that integration is only in the Python SDK. So there's no API support for that yet because we want to figure out what's the right API before implementing it. And then I think we also have a proposal from Shruti. And Shruti, can you share the link in the chat? So
Sure.
basically, yeah. So basically, we want to add that support in the API, but we also want to make it generic so that it's not just one vendor. We want to make sure that we can support different clouds or different snapshot or checkpoint restore provider. So it's going to be somewhat like a plugin that users can pick and choose whatever backend they want to use, and then it's just a medium for storing the state. But eventually, the controller is going to not handling the storing the state part, but handling the part of orchestrating the snapshotting and calling out to the other API for doing the state storing and restoring. And then and we are also thinking about the API of can we reliably figuring out when to automatically suspend or resume a sandbox. So we have some user feedback about that part. So basically, what they did is that they have a TTL. They also have some process for just exit the process the image, the container, when it's not actively being used in the agent in the by the AI agent or by the users, and then basically that will cause the pod to complete, and then after the pod or the sandbox finishes, there's a TTL for cleaning that up. It's the API is very similar to the upstream job TTL after finished API. So basically, that's a way for you to suspend time based, and then users still need to implement some additional logic for terminating the pod, and then let the sandbox controller only handles the TTL part for killing the sandbox after it's not it's finished and not running. But we also are thinking about automatically detecting that. And there's also another user also report that they not only just suspend and resume, they have something like freeze. So freeze is like soft suspension. So first freeze process, and then after a certain time, and then after a longer period, the whole. So freeze means that some resources are still kept, like the pod IP or the host uh, is still the host name is still kept, but then after a longer period of inactive, it's going to be hibernated, which is suspension, and then that's something we are also thinking about when designing this. But we also want to hear more about how users are thinking about this or using it, and we can all discuss this in either Slack or in the issue.
But
Does that
in
answer
order,
your question? Oh,
yeah,
or no?
yes. But what I was wondering is for the snapshot, for example, to keep the memory state somewhere. Don't you need to change also somewhere something in the Kubernetes itself, like core Kubernetes, or is it something that just can be done within Agent Sandbox?
There's also an upstream work for checkpoint restore. I think that part needs some more time to be finalized in upstream. So we are waiting for that in the agent sandbox. We're going to do at a high level for storing the state.
Okay, so there is no need to, or at least you are ready maybe for the runtime, like if you're using the runtime itself, like a Kata or Gvisor, or what do you mean? Because if I understand correctly, pausing a pod, suspending a pod requires some core Kubernetes changes, or am I wrong?
So the suspending a pod right now is healing the pod. So basically terminates the pod and then storing some state in the storage bucket in cloud. That's the current implementation in the Python SDK.
Okay, and this,
So are you saying that in the Python SDK, the snapshotting is being done by the client within the SDK itself?
By the client, but it's calling the API of another controller, which is called GK snapshot.
Oh, okay.
GK pod snapshot. So basically, the pod snapshot is going to handle that part of and
I also
snapshotting
know.
this resources.
Yeah. I also know that very recently, I think it was actually today or yesterday, there's been an upstream PR to gvisor to extend the container dshim to support a restore hook. So for future integrations with the kubelet. So
Yeah,
that's
nice.
I think that's also an advancement from that end.
Yeah, so I think that's going to, I don't work on pod snapshot, but I assume that's going to be integrated with the GK pod snapshot as well.
I have a question about Agent Sandbox and Agent Substrate. I've become familiar with the Substrate project recently, and I was wondering, how do you guys see the relationship between the two? My idea was agent sandboxes being holding harnesses and then performing remote tool calls, tool executions on top of Substrate for in order to better utilize resources. So so harnesses can consume as little resources as possible, as they are the long living creature in that ecosystem, and the tool calls that maybe need more resources can be offloaded into agent substrate actors, and then maybe better utilize resources. Do you guys see it the same? Have you thought about this?
Yeah, I like that. And Justine, I'm sure you have some thoughts about this.
I think we want Agent Sandbox to be awesome, and nothing is out of bounds. I think other people want Agent Substrate to be awesome, and nothing is out of bounds for them. So if you see any shortcomings in Agent Sandbox, let's address them, and I'm sure Agent Substrate will do the same thing, right? Like, I don't think there's something where we'll say, oh, that's Agent Substrate, so we're not going to put it into Kubernetes, right? If we can get it into Agent Sandbox and get it to work, then we'll put it into Kubernetes, right? If we can't, then Agent Substrate, can do that stuff over there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree in the sense that I think both can be awesome, and I think they actually complete each other, right? Because Substrate doesn't provide any support for long-living processes that listen for incoming requests or call for outside events, which is a very real use case for long-running and long-living agents. So that's why my idea was to divide responsibilities between the two.
Yeah,
where Agent Sandbox holds the harness and execution happens elsewhere.
I think it's an interesting space, and I really want to evaluate it. I want us all to explore it all. I will plug one of the thing I'm working on right now in Agent Sandbox is a set of examples that pull the agentic loop, the LLM loop outside of the pod, I guess, and start up a sandbox only when you need a tool call. So that sandbox could be very short-lived. It's more efficient if you cache it. But it seems to work pretty well, and I'm having a lot of fun experimenting with it. So I don't think there's a you must do this here and you must do this there. I think that everyone is open to making both of them great, and we're going to make Agent Sandbox great.
Yeah, definitely. It was just an idea I had, and I was curious as what do you guys think? Thank you.
Yeah, I really like your thoughts about this, because we work on this project deeply, and we want to hear more feedback about how people are using it or thinking about it. So thanks a lot for sharing.
Sure, thank you.
And then thanks. And then I think that's all of the the changes, the pending changes, and then for the remaining item of the beta API change is for providing a migration doc. So basically, the migration is we want to make it less disruptive as possible. So basically, the step will be first, and you can delete the existing sandbox and clam resources, but just not cascading it, which means that you just orphan all the underlying sandboxes without underlying pods or sandboxes without killing the running resources. Just kill the high level API resource, and then after upgrading with the new API, you can apply the new API resource to adopt the existing running process. So that should be not disruptive. And then we're also going to update all the examples in docs. And that should be all for beta, and we should be able to ship the beta API with a new release this week. All right, and I think we're at time. And I'm going to leave just one more question if anyone has a question or comment. All right, I think that's all. Thanks everyone for joining the call today. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.